Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Aisle. I'm your host, Nikki Wolf, and today we have a fun episode in store for you. We are chatting all about women's health, hormone health, and natural ways to help get pregnant and boost that fertility. Our special guest today is Vanessa. She is a women's health nutritionist, a fertility awareness educator, and functional health coach. She works with women of all ages and menstruating individuals to help them balance hormones, heal digestive issues, have PMS, free cycles, and get pregnant naturally. Welcome to the show, Vanessa.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. We are so excited to have you here. And we actually met a few years back doing an online programming, getting our certified functional health coach with Adapt. So that was fun.
I know it's like a blast from the past. I love it.
I know. And she has just taken off, and it's so exciting to see your journey and what you're doing with it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes. Okay. So you gave my kind of formal introduction, which I appreciate. But essentially, I teach women about their bodies. So I'm all about fertility, PMS. I love challenging the status quo when it comes to women's health, because as you know, and as most women know, we are taught literally nothing about our bodies in school. We know how to do the most basic things of knowing that if we have a period, that's probably good. If we don't, we may be pregnant. That's pretty much as far as it goes when it comes to our education. And that is essentially such a disservice when it comes to the way we take care of our bodies, how we're feeling for a majority of our cycles. So many of us are struggling unnecessarily. So it's really my job to blow the doors off of women's health and just rewrite that education, help women realize that they're not alone, that their struggles are completely valid, they're completely seen, and that it's not normal to feel horrible on your period, to be struggling with unbelievable PMS, and they don't have to suffer in silence. So a lot of it is rewriting that narrative. It's teaching you how to feed your body, how to exercise properly, how to build some muscle, how to feel energized. And essentially we're just rewriting a lot of the horrible narratives that are taught to us when we're young.
Absolutely. And I love that so much. And it seems like such a needed, conversation to have, because with stress, with an influx of toxins and, so many different things going on. I mean, there's so many women that are just dying during their, when they're PMSing. And so to have to change that narrative and say, it doesn't have to be like that is just such a valuable thing. Now, I know you mentioned, okay, when we're in school, this is what we're learning, but where did this all begin? Where did you really get the passion behind specifically women's health and fertility?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, as with most women, I had a lot of struggles with my body, with my relationship to food, with my confidence. I know I'm preaching to the choir. Every woman in some way understand what that feels like. Even though our specific struggles are usually going to be a little bit different, mine was more so my relationship to food, my body image, just overall confidence. And as I worked through that journey and I realized, okay, this is really, really running my life. I'm always thinking about food. I'm always hyper cautious about what I'm looking like, if that person is attracted to me or not, and why aren't boys liking me, like all those things in high school. And that caused me to go down a road of having a really difficult relationship to food. So I was following that binge and restrict cycle, like I know so many women and people struggle with. And I basically just got to a point where there was so much that I was doing to support my health. I was vegan at the time. I was exercising. I was intermittent fasting. I was doing all the things that I thought was going to make me the healthiest person, the most confident woman on earth. And all the progress was never enough. I was still binging in private and not understanding what was going on with my body. And at the same time, I was on and off this struggle bus with cystic acne. So acne, similar to body image, just a below tier confidence. And I couldn't understand why I had it. Went on and off birth control. It always came back. I wasn't sure what the heck was going on. And no one was teaching me that, hey, this actually may be a warning light that your hormones are imbalanced. Maybe you're also binging and having these difficult relationships with food for another reason, or maybe they're connected, right? So as I started to move through that journey, I just dove deep into understanding my body, understanding my relationship with food, listened to a ton of podcasts, was working with someone one-on-one, just understanding those patterns. And once I started to learn about my body, I could not stop screaming it from the rooftops. I was like, did you guys know that when you're under eating protein and you're under eating calories, your natural inclination to binge eat, you cannot fight it? And did you know that hormonal birth control has these side effects? And when you come off, all the things you went on it for are likely to return. I was just blowing my own mind left, right, and center. And I couldn't help but share that information with my girlfriends. And as I finished up my university degree, I thought to myself, okay, I need to go the health and wellness route. I have no idea what a career could look like in this world, but that's how I met you. I did the health coaching degree as well and got that baseline level of education. And then after that, started to trickle this information into my clients, worked primarily with women anyways. And anytime I mentioned PMS, birth control cycles, started to talk about hormones, everybody was interested. Everybody was telling their friends. They were asking questions. It lit a fire under all of us. So from there, it just really snowballed. I found out that I love to work with women. I love to work with pregnancy, fertility, PMS. And then, like I said before, rewriting that narrative, because for someone who has been told they can't get pregnant naturally or their periods, they're going to pass out from pain, and that's just the way that their life is going to be, it is bonkers when you can change that and you can show them the way that that's not the way it has to be. And it is just the most rewarding thing in the whole world. So as always, it's from my personal journey and it led me down this path.
Absolutely. And I think that's what happens for so many who are now working in a similar field in regards to health and wellness is we've gone through those hurdles and we've hit those dark days and we were able to work through it and find something naturally that helped us not just survive, but thrive. And like you said, it's like, I can't help but like shout this from the rooftops. And, it's such a conversation. And I know so many individuals who are truly in so much pain. And I even think about years ago, I would throw up during my periods. And now, granted, I am pregnant right now, and I mean, even this, I have PCOS, which I know we're going to be chatting about, and I got pregnant instantly, and it has been the most blissful pregnancy. And there could be a variety of factors in there, but a lot of it does have to do with what you consume, your lifestyle, your stress levels. And just like you mentioned, it's like we're digging in and we're thinking we're doing the right things. We're intermittent fasting, we're vegan. I mean, I was vegan for 3 years, raw vegan, intermittent fasting, keto, this, that, and the other. And although I didn't have, acne or anything like that, I had a number of other health things, internal, especially mental and hormone dysregulation. And so we think we're doing the right thing, but ultimately it comes back to hormones. And let's balance that out because that is the root of everything. And let's heal those. And sometimes it's really pulling back the curtain of like, oh, I need to eat more. I need to do less. I need to have more solitude. And it's like so counterintuitive to what we're normally used to.
Yes. We're always taught push harder, work out more, eat less, get thinner, like all of these narratives that are so anti what is actually going to work. And we have to give our bodies so much grace and so much patience, because we also have to remember that it takes on average 15 years for new research to make its way into mainstream education. So we are being taught such old information, and women are never studied to begin with. So the information, just exactly like you said, that we're even getting is kind of from a faulty source a lot of the time, or it's been disproven. So a lot of the time, you're exactly right. We're challenging the status quo. We're saying, hey, maybe you're going to cut down on the F45 and those HIIT workouts and actually eat more food and go on more walks and don't just try to kill yourself with cardio. What if that wasn't the answer? What if that was actually making your problems worse? But then again, people get confused and they're like, okay, then what am I supposed to do? Because everybody is challenging each other's information.
You're so right. And it's like laughable because I know I've pivoted down that so many times. And then finally, when my adrenals just completely shot, my doctor's like, the only workouts I want you to do is walking, swimming, Pilates. And that's pretty much it. Everything, and so it's just like, it's so different than what we're learning. So I hope for any listeners that, and we can talk about what is, a period that we maybe like symptoms we shouldn't be feeling or other things like that. And so let's kind of dive into talking about hormones and balancing hormones and what it might look like or feel like if those hormones are dysregulated.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I want everybody to remember, if this is the one thing you take away, is that hormones don't become imbalanced for no reason. There is always an underlying reason or reasons to correct, to fix, to heal, whatever it is, to make sure that your hormones are balanced. So I like to think of hormonal symptoms and hormonal imbalance symptoms as more so a warning light. It's kind of like your check engine light. It means that something is wrong, whether it is PMS. So let's talk about cycles. For example, if you're in your fertile years and you're a cyclical person, you're having a menstruation, then your PMS symptoms shouldn't be any greater than a 1 to a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, which again, like you're saying, almost laughable, because how many people
Wow.
do you know that actually have good periods? You're the weird one if you have good periods.
Yeah.
We almost ask each other, oh, how bad are your cramps? Because mine are bad, but are yours horrible? And that is in and of itself so ridiculous, but just the way it is because it's so common. But that actually means that we've got an imbalance between estrogen and progesterone, and that there's a problem in the body. So first and foremost, your period should be minimal to no pain. And then if you do have those other issues, potentially there's an underlying reason, but 90+% of the time there is just a hormonal imbalance going on. Second thing is your period length. So shouldn't be less than 3 days or more than 7. So again, with hormones, we have that Goldilocks zone. We don't want them super, super low. Low isn't better, but more also isn't better. We want to make sure we have that happy medium, that optimal range. And then as far as ovulation goes, we love ovulation should be present every cycle, meaning that you get a regular period. So if you're someone who misses periods, or your cycles are super, super long and then they're really short, that's telling us that you're not ovulating consistently, and that there may be an underlying problem with fertility, with hormones, like you're talking about, could be PCOS lurking in there. And that is another warning light. And then the dreaded pre-period symptoms. You should not feel anxious, moody, irritable, have trouble sleeping, be snapping at your partner for breathing too loud. All of those things are too much when it comes to PMS, is a signal that we're low in progesterone, that we've got too much stress going on, your body's depleted. But most women, they just take that at face value because we're taught, oh yeah, you're just hormonal. Like, welcome to your period. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So in your menstruating years, that's what I would say are some classic signs. And then beyond that, it can really range from hot flashes, headaches. You can have sore vein pain, for example, if you do develop vein issues. And then you can also have extreme fatigue during the day. You can have other issues that can be hormones, but they can also wear a lot of different hats.
Amazing. And, I want to kind of step back to when you're talking about ovulation, because one thing that comes to mind, especially just I'm passionate, I love working with women as well. And something that I've experienced, and I know so many others, is, I've had a handful of eating disorders. I was severely underweight. You lose your period for however many months. And like when let's say you're in high school, it's like kind of a cool thing. Like, oh, I don't have to have my period. And it's like such misinformation. And as you get older, you're like, whoa, that did some damage. And a lot of times, okay, granted, if somebody doesn't have their period, they might be an athlete, they might be severely underweight, not eating enough. But what about for that one-off chance that it is an athlete that is trying to eat, like kind of not necessarily the individual who's like not doing it the right way, but the one that, was working out really hard, is trying to get their period, recognizes that it is important. What would you recommend for them if part of their schedule and their routine, whether they're young or, college years, 30s, 40 years old, and they have to kind of have this very active lifestyle? What would you recommend for them?
Yes. Okay. So it's all about where we can compromise or where we can find balance. So first of all, I would say, is there any way for you to have more cyclical like training? So of course, there are different hormonal fluctuations that will happen in a typical cycle. If there is any way for you to have more intense periods, more periods where you're doing less intense exercise, you can still stay active. Absolutely. But if that is possible to phase training a little bit, that would be a beautiful thing, so that you're not constantly always at peak intensity. That would be number one, is try to find a little bit of balance there. Even if there's a little bit of an off season, let's try to optimize that as much as possible. Second thing I would say is, what are you doing the other 22 hours of the day when you're not working out? So even if you're doing every day twice a day, or you're doing 4 hours a day of your exercise, what are you doing the other 20 hours? So are you eating a ton of food? That's going to be so important, whether we need to reverse diet you, meaning you have to eat a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more as we boost that metabolism. Because a lot of athletes, their export is out here. They're running on stress hormones and they're go, 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 but their input is down here. They don't have enough rest. They don't have enough rejuvenation. They don't have enough nutrients. So usually we're going to need to supplement a bit more with our minerals, things like magnesium. You're going to have to eat a ton of protein. A lot of carbohydrates are going to be really important here, because carbohydrates are naturally parasympathetic, meaning they help us rest, digest, chill out. So don't be skimping on your carbs. Try to have whole food carbohydrates as much as possible. And I would also say eat within regular intervals. So a lot of the athletes I work with, we're having them eat every 3 to 5 hours, not every 1 to 2 hours. That's a little extreme and that's going to suck. But we don't want you going more than 5 hours without food, especially when you have intensity that high in your life, because we need to keep that blood sugar stable. So having protein, fat, carbohydrates every 3 to 5 hours is going to be crucial. And then, of course, getting a lot of that low intensity movement. So can we have you go on a nice walk, go on a nice hike? Can we have you be or have a little bit more intimacy in your life? Can we have you sleep at least 8 to 9 hours per night uninterrupted? All of those things are going to be so important. If you do have to maintain that high intensity exercise, we want to make sure then you are offsetting that with as much rest and digest, as much rejuvenation as possible. And if you're starting to skimp in those areas, your period's going to say, see ya, and she's not going to return until you relax.
Absolutely. So it sounds like there's plenty we can do and a lot in our control to help regulate that. And I know you touched upon adequate amount of protein, carbs in regards to fat, because I know that's a huge component of, how we make our hormones. What would you advise in regards to fat? Maybe quantity, quality, what does that look like?
Yes. Okay. Great question. So both are really important. We don't want to overeat fat. We don't want to undereat fat. So, and we also want to make sure we pick the right sources. So there is a lot of taboo when it comes to food, saying good and bad foods. When it comes to fat, there is no reason why we need to be eating canola oil, soybean oil, or processed oils like grapeseed, peanut oil, things like that. We want you to more so be cooking in things like butter, coconut oil, olive oil. All of those are incredible. We want to make sure we have a good mix of saturated fat, but you're also mixing in some olive oil in there. You're using other sources. Having full fat dairy is a beautiful thing. The way that you get the nutrients from dairy absorbed is you have fat there. So the general recommendation is aim for about 1 to 2 tablespoons per meal. And usually I don't like to see people go much higher than 100 grams of fat per day. But again, that's going to be subject person to person, how much they're eating, but making sure that you're also not going less than 50, for example, grams of fat per day if you are someone who's going to track more of that quantity. But about 2 tablespoons per meal and then a tablespoon or so at a snack is great.
Okay, great. I think that's very valuable information. And, let's kind of circle back to when we're talking about PMS, and you say on a scale of 1 to 3, which like blows my mind too. PMS free cycles. How do we make that happen? And again, I think it has a lot to do with the hormones and that conversation you were talking about. Any other recommendations? Maybe there's, we sleep, stress, quality food, any sort of supplements that you would recommend? I mean, where do you kind of have that conversation with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're always going to start food first. We're going to start with sleep, exercise, stress management. And those are kind of going to be our main areas. But then, of course, we look into digestion, blood sugar balance. There are a lot of reasons why, like I was saying before, hormones can become imbalanced. So first and foremost, we have to look at why. So why are you getting PMS? Why are your cycles so horrible? And where is the PMS? When are they bad? Are they bad the week before, or sometimes for a lot of women, 2 weeks before? My heart goes out to you. Is it bad just on the period? Is it both? So for 2 to 3 weeks of your cycle, you feel horrible. Your symptoms just change, but no matter what, you're feeling awful. So depending on where it is in the cycle, that's going to tell us something different. If it is only the week before the period to 2 weeks before, we know for sure you're most likely low in progesterone, which is an essential hormone that gives us that calm feeling. We call it like our Netflix and chill hormone. You feel good. You feel relaxed. You feel easy. You feel very calm. calm the week to 2 weeks before your period. On the flip side, you can feel anxious, moody, irritable, have trouble sleeping, all those things if it's low. If you also have issues on the period as well, and say you get breast tenderness before your period, you spot a lot before your period, or for example, your flow is super heavy, or you get horrible back pain, horrible cramps, things like that, then we know our girl estrogen might need to come down a little bit. And always when it comes to PMS, and this is nice and easy, we need to rebalance those two hormones. But there's a lot of reasons why they can become imbalanced. So it's my job kind of as that navigator to see, okay, what are your personal triggers? Is it digestion, blood sugar balance, nutrient deficiencies? Are you too stressed out? Things like that. So no matter what, it's a multi-pronged approach, but you hit the nail right on the head. We want to make sure you're getting 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep. So I am the biggest advocate of an evening routine. We have a technology curfew, so you're not scrolling TikTok before or up until 11:30 and then just pretending you can go to sleep right after. That won't fly. So making sure you're shutting off your phone about an hour before bed. Maybe you're having a bath, you're having some time with your partner to hang out, hopefully get intimate or something like that. That would be fantastic. Or at the very least, you're spending time with you. So you're going to read a book, you're going to journal, you might even do some deep breathing or meditation, something to calm you down and get ready for sleep. And then we want to make sure you're not setting that alarm for at least 7 to 9 hours. And I'm also a big fan of the sunrise alarm clock. So if people don't know what that is, it's amazing. It is great. You can get on Amazon or whatever. And it essentially wakes you up with this very bright light, starts orange, and then it becomes to be essentially like a yellow, like it's waking you up with the sunrise. A gentle waking up like that will make you feel much more energized and will also lower morning stress levels. And then when it comes to the nutrition, you're exactly right. We want to piggyback that with blood sugar and digestion, or having a full breakfast within the first hour of waking. Lots of protein, lots of fat, lots of fiber. We love eggs in the morning. We love omelets and things like that, or a very nutrient-dense smoothie is a great alternative. And then making sure you're slowing down, eating your meals, you're not drinking too much water. All things like that are going to, they might seem really simple and like they're too simple to do something, but they are things you repeat every day, multiple times a day. So they have such a huge impact because those are going to compound over time. And then, of course, we want to get some exercise in there. Love our morning walks in the sunlight. We love strength training 2 to 3 times a week. I want you to feel strong. I want you to build muscle. And then I want you, if you like Pilates or you like to jog, that's great. But you don't have to run if you don't want to.
Incredible. I mean, such a valuable source of information and recommendations that we can all apply to balance out those hormones. And so you mentioned progesterone, kind of like that Netflix and chill, and now estrogen, and I might have missed it, but what would you kind of credit too high of estrogen for and too low of estrogen? What does that look like in the body?
Yes. Okay. So most people are struggling with too high of estrogen, too low progesterone. That's the vast majority of PMS issues. You can't really have high progesterone because you only create it from ovulation, whereas you can have sky high estrogen levels, and a lot of us do. And the same with remedying hormones. There's a lot of reasons why they're going to become imbalanced. Could be a multi-pronged approach, could be one specific thing. For most people, it's a combination of a few things. Digestion. So they're not digesting properly. A lot of us are bloated. A lot of us are gassy, having acid reflux. We're constipated, and then we have looser bowel movements. Most of us do not feel great when it comes to the digestion department. Second thing is our detoxification. Similar to digestion, that sucks for most people. And especially if you're on medications for a long period of time, birth control included, it can tax the liver. So your body's always detoxifying, but sometimes it needs a little bit of boost. I also love using supplementation and herbal medicine for this, and we can get into the nitty gritty if you want to. But those two main pathways need to be open and clear and functioning at a high level. Otherwise, if you think of an assembly line that has way too much packaged at the back and it's moving too slowly through, you just get that backlog of continuous estrogen. And that's what's happening with so many women. And then we also want to look at external estrogens. And this isn't talked about enough. But when it comes to plastics, your personal care products, your cleaning products, there is so much when it comes to the chemicals and the estrogen mimicking compounds that they have. And they can block your estrogen receptors. They can mimic estrogen in the body. They can have you create more estrogen without you even trying. So we need to make sure that we're also swapping those products for healthier alternatives.
Absolutely. And I think it's starting to become a little bit more known, but it's still like it can be overwhelming for some of like, okay, now I got to get rid of all my plastic and now I need to switch up my makeup. But just, baby steps, doing things at a time. Like for me, with makeup, I'm not going to toss all my old makeup. I'm slowly transitioning to new stuff. So apply what you can, do what you can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. I don't know if I've ever made that connection between estrogen and digestive issues before, that those are so strongly correlated.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's so
And the
fascinating.
main reason for that, if anybody is curious, is that you get your excess estrogen out from your bowel movements. So if you're not pooping every day, you bet your bottom dollar you are going to struggle with estrogen related issues, because that's the way that we're getting rid of estrogen. It's not coming out any other way. So most people are struggling with constipation, or like I was saying, they fluctuate with their bowel movements. But we want to make sure 1 to 3 good, fully formed, sink into the bottom of the toilet bowel movements, and most people are not getting that. They're going every couple days, or they're little rabbit pellets, and you bet your bottom dollar we are struggling with estrogen with that one.
Absolutely. So fascinating. Okay. I hope that rings true for so many of us listening. There's quite a handful of things that we can do to help balance out those hormones. Now, let's kind of shift over before we dive into different supplementation that can be supportive. Getting pregnant naturally. I know so many and loved ones right now are going through that and struggling, and it's just this uphill climb, and it's just such a sad and just emotional journey for some. What
Mm-hmm.
would you recommend for that?
Yes. Okay. So this is a huge conversation, and it's very important that we, same as with our hormones, we look at it from a lot of different angles. So first and foremost, the easiest thing to start with is the cycle, because we want a woman to be having a cycle within 24 to 36 days in length. So period to period, that your period should come every 24 to 36 days. First and foremost, if that is shorter or longer, there's your first red flag. We want to look at ovulation. Is it coming too early? Is it absent or completely? Or are you ovulating a little bit later? That's going to give us a bit of information. Second thing, like I talked about before, your flow. So a lot of women will struggle to get pregnant when they have an excessively light period, because often that egg can't implant. Even if it gets fertilized, it's not implanting in that uterine lining. So that's something I see very often. And then on the flip side, if the period is excessively long and heavy, sometimes that woman is deficient in progesterone. Sometimes she will have multiple miscarriages. And that is because the egg can hypothetically implant, but that uterine lining isn't sustained. And then we have the devastating effects of that miscarriage, of that loss. So those two hormones, of course, are going to be essential. And I love talking about tracking your cycle. So you don't necessarily need to work with someone right away if you don't have this data already. I would say take a couple cycles if you've got the luxury of time, and track your cycle. Something like your basal body temperature, grab an oral thermometer, take it every single morning, record it in a trusted app like Read Your Body. That's my personal favorite. And take a look. You should have lower temperatures before you ovulate. They should spike and stay high the rest of your cycle. And there are a lot of resources you can find online about this if that doesn't make sense. But something like that is such an easy place to start, because you can start to see, am I ovulating? What are my temperatures like? When am I ovulating? So I'm a huge proponent of that education and tracking the cycle. I also teach women to track cervical fluid. We do their LH testing, all of these natural fertility signs. And then also knowing the specific days you're fertile. It sounds crazy because we're taught that the one day you have sex, you're going to get pregnant, and that's just the way it is. So we're almost scared straight that way. But a lot of people, they're like, I'm doing it all the time, and no fruits of that labor. Like, that's not happening. And a lot of the time, that fertile window is teeny, teeny, tiny for these people who potentially don't have a ton of cervical fluid to keep sperm alive, or they don't have that optimal fertility. So if they're not doing it on the specifically perfect fertile days, they're going to miss that constantly. And a lot of the time, that's just an easy fix. We can say, okay, you're fertile on these 4 days. Make sure that you are constantly trying on these 4 days. And if you try outside of that, nothing's going to happen for you, even if we want it to. So I'm huge with the baseline education. I start there, but then of course I look at the hormonal imbalances, as many, many people struggling to get pregnant, they have hormonal imbalances. And then usually If it is a heterosexual couple, then I will also look at the male fertility. So making sure that they're checking in on their sperm count and their motility is 50% of the battle. So we want to make sure that if your cycle is looking fabulous as a female and you have a male partner, you want to make sure that he is also getting his sperm checked if you are struggling to get pregnant.
And when would you recommend? I mean, I can't imagine that's like an easy feat or super cheap to do. I mean, or maybe it's something covered by insurance easily. But when, like, how? And I guess it could vary from person to person. But the time for, okay, we need you guys to go get checked for your sperm count. When would you recommend? Like, should you track, a few different periods, and then if nothing's happening or there's no success at that point, then have, the guy go in and get his sperm checked, or any recommendations on that?
Yeah, that's a great question because it may not be super accessible. And then sometimes you're exactly right. It's covered. Or if you have a high disposable income or high level of disposable income, then you can have the luxury of getting it tested. I would say if the female in the relationship is tracking her cycle, she knows what's going on, and we've optimized her cycle as much as possible. So overall, you can see she's ovulating every cycle without a doubt. Her cycle length is pretty good, is maybe even 90% there, 80% there. That's pretty good. And she's having a regular period. She's not struggling with a ton of PMS. Things look good in her blood work as well. Then if for about 3 to 6 months, nothing is happening and you're for sure trying on the right days. And again, this will vary. Some people are needing to get pregnant yesterday. And some people are like, when it happens, it happens. We've got time. There's really no rush. For the people that need to get pregnant yesterday, obviously sooner is better than later for getting things checked. But if you've got an open timeline, try for a full 6 months. Make sure you're doing it on the right days. You are actually paying attention to your fertility window. And if nothing is happening, then I would definitely get a full sperm check, full write-up, and make sure you're checking in on the testosterone levels, making sure you're checking in on a lot of the male fertility. And I say that because I was working with a client, to give you a little bit of a story. She came to me and her cycles were definitely on the light side. She had lower estrogen, lighter periods. So we were like, okay, it's pretty easy to see why potentially you may not be getting pregnant. But her cycles were optimized within the first 6 months, and then they were trying for multiple months. And I was like, okay, from our end, you look picture perfect. Your cycle is gorgeous. You are so fertile. Let's look at the male side. And when we got his sperm checked, he had 0% viable sperm. And all of the heads and tails were switched. So no matter how fertile this woman is, no matter how amazing her ovulation is, the egg will be waiting and sperm can't find it. So thankfully they went the IVF route. They're totally fine. They did a little bit of IUI. That was fine. But they needed that intervention. And if they didn't get that, they could have been waiting for months or years if they weren't able to get that sperm check. So use your intuition. But I would say if you're trying for more than 6 months and you know what you're doing, there's usually something to be found out there.
Okay, great recommendation. And I fully support the tracking, whether you do it individually, whether you work with a practitioner. It's interesting because I have the Aura ring. That's how I first found out I was pregnant. Is it kept alerting me and saying, yeah, it was so fascinating.
That's so cool.
That was like, your temperature is increasing, and it would tell me that, and I was like, okay. And I don't know, it was maybe the third day, like, okay, your temperature is still increasing. And I think I was like in a Pilates class, like about to start, or maybe even the middle of it. And I like Googled, because I'm somewhat aware of all this, but it's not, intuition.
Yeah.
So I Googled, increased temperature. Could that be a possibility of getting pregnant? And so I like rushed home, and found out I was pregnant. But yeah, it's just like, there's so many accessibilities or things available. Obviously, this is a little bit more expensive. You can track with just a regular thermometer, but there's a lot out there.
Absolutely. That's so exciting. I love it. That's the way you found out. That's honestly adorable. I love that.
And so I'd love to, because I've read this and I'm curious your thoughts on it. I read that even becoming intimate a few days before your window, that the sperm can stay in the body to help. And so that, that's another thing that, I've read. I don't know if you've had any success or heard anything about that, of, even let's say this is your window, to make sure to be intimate a few days before, just for that extra insurance.
Yes. So when it comes to fertility, sperm can survive in the body for up to 5 days. So technically, you can be fertile for up to 5 days before your ovulation. And the only time you can get pregnant, like actively pregnant, sperm fertilizing egg, is when you're ovulating, right? The egg is waiting for the sperm. That's the only time it can happen. That's that small 24-hour window. But those 5 days before, if you have something called fertile cervical fluid, meaning it's that stuff you find in your underwear, every woman knows what I'm talking about. And when it's white and creamy, or especially when it's stretchy, clear, and slippery, so very important if you're trying to get pregnant, but also if you're trying to avoid pregnancy, you want to make sure that there is an abundance of sperm every day that you're having that fertile cervical fluid, because its only job is to find sperm, feed it, keep it alive in the body up until ovulation. And when you have one job, you're pretty good at your job. That's literally all she's doing. So if you do have that fertile cervical fluid, you're exactly right. That's how you can still be fertile even before ovulation. And then it shuttles those sperm up through the cervix out to meet that egg. And that can be pretty upsetting for some if you're not trying to get pregnant and you don't really know how the cervical fluid works.
Okay, great clarification. Now, I'd love to pivot over to another topic that I think is so common, yet so many women don't know about it, don't know that they have it, and that's PCOS. So I'd love to hear more about that. I think maybe some people have heard the terminology, they don't know what it is. How do you support it? What can that lead to? Let's hear what you got.
Yes. Okay. So say if for example, a woman is coming to me and she's saying, okay, I have PCOS, or I've been told I have PCOS. First thing I ask is, have you been off birth control recently? So did you recently come off birth control within the past 2 years, sometimes even 3 years, depending on what the lifestyle is like? Have you gotten this diagnosis before? Or if you were on birth control for a period of time, what were your cycles like before birth control? Because I often see two camps. One is that this person had great cycles. They went on birth control, they came off, and now they're told they have PCOS. And they're like, what the heck? My cycles were totally fine. I don't know what's going on, but now my period's gone missing for the first time in my life, and I have no idea what's happening. Second camp is that their cycles their whole life have been super irregular. So since they went through puberty, they've been really long and then really short, or maybe they were horrible cycles, or maybe some people are put on birth control because they didn't have a cycle at all. They've never had a period before, and that's bonkers. So that's kind of the first question to ask, because that also we can see how deeply it runs. If it's been going on since the beginning of time, since you went through puberty, that's going to be one camp. Usually that means it's a little bit more severe. Usually there's going to be needed some kind of medical intervention. There may be more difficulty getting pregnant, or maybe a longer road. Second camp, but yet not impossible at all. Second camp is that if this is literally the first time you've ever heard this word, your cycles have been beautiful, but you came off birth control and now this is smacking you in the face, or it's a new thing, your cycles were regular even without birth control and now they're irregular, usually there's a trigger there. Most often, over 70% of PCOS is related to your blood sugar and your insulin levels. So we were talking about blood sugar earlier when it came to nutrition. How often are you eating? Are you eating enough protein, enough fiber, enough fat? Are you going to the bathroom every single day, having good bowel movements? All of these things are so important when it comes to your hormonal metabolism and all of the hormones that your body's dealing with, but also your stress levels. So you will be hard pressed to find a woman with PCOS who was not stressed in some capacity, whether it is a nutritional stressor or it's a relationship stressor, life stressor. I've seen so many different things, but usually you can pinpoint something is stressing your body out. And it's often the very type A, the rush personalities, or the people that are never ever late. They're terrified of being late. And often they're the overachievers. They're usually intermittent fasting, or they have a history, like you were saying, Nikki, with yourself, like history of eating disorders, things like that. That is setting you up for having your PCOS continue to snowball. So we really are trying to peel back those layers, figure out what type of PCOS you have, because there are 4 main types, and making sure that we know the next steps to take. But I would start and look, okay, has this always been for me as long as I can remember? Or is this a relatively new thing?
Awesome. Okay. So for those of us that are tuning in, one, I should have clarified what PCOS is, what does it look like? So polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I know it to be a collection of cysts on your ovaries. What might those symptoms look like? So somebody's listening in and maybe they've never even heard this terminology. Maybe they're struggling and having really irregular or difficult periods. What are some common symptoms of PCOS?
Yes. Okay. So now we know that approximately about 1 in 8 women are struggling with PCOS, which is skyrocketing compared to what they used to be. So we know it's an increasing issue. So technically, and they are thinking about changing the name because you actually don't have to have polycystic ovaries in order to have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Sounds ridiculous, but stay with me. So there are 3 criteria we want to check off, and you need to have 2 of the 3. So number 1 is polycystic ovaries. So what they're going to do is they're going to do an ultrasound of your ovaries. And if you have, it looks like almost like a pearl necklace, that is your polycystic ovaries. You can see there's a lot of cysts within your ovaries. What essentially that is showing you is that you've got a lot of eggs and follicles that have been developing each cycle, but none of them are really ovulating. So in a cycle, you should develop an egg, grow it nice, big and strong, and then it should be released out into your fallopian tube. That is ovulation. With PCOS, that egg develops, but doesn't burst, and then they collect in the ovaries. So that's usually what happens. That's what you're seeing there. Second thing is that you've got elevated androgen hormones. So think of testosterone, your male dominant hormones. So women here are going to notice hair loss on the head, hair growth on the body. So whether that is black hairs on the chin, around the nipples, your bikini line, your treasure trail can become very thick or very dominant. All of those things are very common. And then we also want to look at cycle length. So the third criteria is irregular cycles. So I'm not exactly sure what they classify the specific length, but we would look at, are they consistently longer than 36 days, or are they 18 days and then 90 days and 100 days and 22 days? They're really all over the place. So most women with PCOS will easily go 100 days without their period. And they're often not ovulating. So we say anovulatory cycles. The ovulation isn't happening. Those eggs are collecting in the ovaries, and now we're getting a bunch of these cysts. So that would also look like an array of hormonal imbalances. And so many women will struggle with weight gain, especially around the midsection. And yet they're told to lose weight, but it's very, very difficult when you have PCOS. You are usually struggling with stress issues. So you may have that binge and restrict tendency. You may feel out of control around food. You may feel like you're going to break down every second, or you cannot regulate your hormonal activity. That is usually a telltale of some imbalanced hormones. You may also be feeling extremely tired and just extremely burnt out. And that's because usually your body's very stressed out. So a lot of these things are going to be telltales that you do have PCOS, but you technically need 2 of those 3 criteria.
Okay, great clarification. And it's interesting. Okay, so a lot of these individuals struggle with weight gain. So then what we do is we undereat and we overtrain to try to lose it, and we only just make the situation worse.
That is the bane of my existence. Yes, that is that's the hardest part, because you're told to lose weight, that it will make it better, which it will. But also, how are you supposed to lose weight when it's coming on because of this condition? So you're exactly right. It's peeling those layers back, opening the curtain, looking at why this, again, why? Where is this coming from? What are the imbalances? And then losing that extra body fat in a healthy, sustainable way. No crash diets, no juice cleanses, please no detox teas. We're beyond that. No more.
Yep, exactly. We're in a new era. Yeah. It's eating good quality foods, moving your body, not, overstimulation. Yeah, there's so many things now.
And we're leaving that in 2022. No, thank you.
Yes, exactly. So when we talk about natural support, so, we've talked about lifestyle, supplementation. Now, again, hormones, there's a variety of them. We want to balance them, and that could look different based on progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. What is kind of a general recommendation if you are somebody with really difficult periods, with PCOS, difficulty getting pregnant? What kind of supplementations, like regimen, comes to mind?
Yeah, so this is super general, but most people, and always check with your practitioner because I'm not your nutritionist, but most people will do pretty well with a few things. Number one, especially if you are recently off birth control or you are struggling to get pregnant. And if you are in that window of you're within 4 months of actively trying to get pregnant, then you're pretty safe to start a prenatal. And as with all supplementation, and I know you know this, Nikki, but not all supplements are created equal. So please don't just go to your local drugstore, pick a prenatal gummy off the count or off the shelf and just say, okay, this is what I'm going to take. I know it's confusing, but you have to buy from a third party tested, trusted brand where what they say is in that supplement is actually in that supplement. And it's in ways that your body or informs your body recognizes and can absorb. So we're not just making expensive pee. Your body can actually absorb that. So a prenatal is going to be really important. Trying to find a high quality version of that is great. Magnesium is also great in the form of magnesium glycinate or threonate. Taking that before bed not only is great for our sleep, and now we're getting two birds with one stone. We're supporting sleep while also supporting fertility, but magnesium is an essential mineral. And most of us are deficient in our magnesium, and especially those who are high stress because you burn through your magnesium more than anybody else. So I usually recommend magnesium within an hour to 2 hours of going to bed. Again, pure source, and usually around 200, 300 milligrams would be pretty good. Usually that's about 2 capsules. Another one would be an omega-3 fatty acid. Again, super pure source. It shouldn't give you any fishy burps or a fishy aftertaste, and it shouldn't smell horrendous. All of those are signs that it's gone bad, and most fish oils are not very good, unfortunately. But taking that, at least about 1,000 milligrams of an omega-3 is going to be great anytime throughout the day. But to support lower levels of inflammation, you're also getting these essential fatty acids that are really hard to get through food consistently. Those would be three main things. And then also on more the fertility side, when it comes to herbal medicine, love, love, love Vitex or chase tree berry. I've seen incredible success when I bring that in with my clients, whether they're struggling with PMS or just overall fertility. It is a game changer. So I love Organic Olivia's tonics. I love St. Francis tonics. I'm not sure if Life Season has
Yes.
anything Vitex.
So it's funny you mentioned, so the omega-3, we have an EPA. So there's EPA and DHA. We have an EPA, we have magnesium glycinate, and we are getting ready to come out with a product that is very connected to the conversation we're having now. And we're more than likely going to be able to use the magnesium threonate in there, which is incredible. And then we have a formula called Premen's Tea, and we do use the Vitex. And I have heard so many incredible stories. And, even young girls who have lost their periods and they're like, this is the only thing that I was able to get my period back with.
Yes.
So I will be sure to link that stuff in the show notes and kind of all the supplements that we're discussing. I'll make sure to mention that.
Yeah. And that's, I usually find it's really beautiful when we use both vitamins and minerals, but also herbal medicine. I've just found that to be the strongest. Usually we do need a little bit of both, especially to get someone off the ground. And then later on, you're going to find a routine that works good for you. Personally, I still take all three of those things, not the prenatal, but I do a multi myself, or a B complex or something like that. You can get your blood work done. You can see what you're deficient in, but it's really, really important that you're finding a supplement regimen that is not only supporting your long-term goals, but is also straightforward enough for you to stay consistent with it. That's usually the hardest part for people.
Incredible. Awesome. Okay. So what I'm curious about now is, what have you learned from being in this field and working in, women's health and fertility that you feel like most people should know?
Oh, that's such a good question.
I know there's so many things.
So many things. Honestly, I would say above all else is that your symptoms and how you feel is completely valid. I would say the most frustrating thing, and I have never worked with someone who doesn't already have a previous story. Usually they've been to a lot of people before they're seeing me or before they're even opening up about that conversation. And they didn't know that it wasn't normal to have PMS like this, to throw up on your period, to pass out, which is ridiculous. Whenever someone is complaining of the symptoms that we have when we're PMSing, it's a problem. It's a red flag. We're doing tests. We're getting blood work done. There's something wrong with this person. But when it's PMS, oh, it's no big deal. You're totally fine. That's just the way womanhood is. Welcome to having a period. So I would say, you know your body best. You know when you're not feeling well, whether that is headaches, low energy, you feel like you're doing the right things and your body fat isn't going anywhere, or you're having PMS, or your periods don't feel right. I would say trust your intuition and know that whatever you're feeling is valid. It's not your fault that people aren't treating you properly, but it is your responsibility to find someone who will. Otherwise, we're just going to keep running the same race. So just make sure you're opening those conversations and have the courage to say, okay, if you're not serving me, to whoever is talking to you, whether it's a practitioner or whoever, I'm going to go find somebody else, because it's your life, it's your body. You do not deserve to feel horrible for a quarter or half of your fertile years. That's crazy. And that's setting you up for long-term issues post-menopause, for example. So I would definitely say that everything you're feeling is valid. If no one's told you that, I will tell you that right now. Trust your intuition, go find somebody that will listen to you, and make sure you start doing your own research, because we all have to be our own health advocates.
Incredible. And I couldn't agree more that especially the saying, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And I hear so many individuals say, well, getting older, I'm supposed to feel this way. And it's like, or being on my period. And there's a point of like, yes, it's going to be slightly more difficult, or you might notice a little bit more symptoms, but it shouldn't be so severe. And we do have the power to take our health in our control. And that's something I'm very passionate about, is not letting my circumstances, my diagnosis dictate how I feel, what I'm doing in my day. And so really taking charge and ownership of that, I think is so important. Now,
absolutely.
I know your page, and we'll get to that, kind of your socials and how people can find you. But as far as resources, what have been some of the most helpful resources that have helped you along this journey?
Oh, yes, I love this question. Okay, so if you are a big reader or a podcast listener or blog reader, I got you covered, because there's a ton of things. So first and foremost, if you are a book kind of gal, Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler is one of the best books ever. If you are new to this information, get ready to literally just be reading with your jaw on the floor. That's basically what happened to me. Beyond the Pill by Jolene Brighton is another incredible resource if you are learning about birth control, if you're recently off birth control, if you're just curious about your hormonal health in general. She's also coming out with a new book, which I'm so excited to read, called Is This Normal? It's essentially like a guide to women's health. It's amazing. The Period Repair Manual by Dr. Laura Briden is another amazing book. And there's a lot of very specific steps there. So it is literally a period repair manual. If you've got horrible cramps, she shows you this is what it means. These are some steps you can take. So it's a very hands-on book. A few podcasts I really do love. Dr. Andrew Huberman, he's got the Huberman Lab, an amazing one. I'm sure you listen to that, Nikki. He is
my whole family does. My whole family does. He's incredible, and it's all kinds of topics, and it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And that's why I really like that too, because sometimes you can pigeonhole yourself into just hormones, just women's health, just periods, but it really is everything. And he talks about motivation and drive and mental health and exercise, all those things. Love that podcast. I also love anything that Jolene Brighton is interviewed on. Just search her in the podcast history. That is also going to be great. As far as blog articles go, and she also has a podcast, Organic Olivia. She's an herbalist. Love her formulations, love her blog. Her podcast is amazing. And then some other blogs I love, Jolene Brighton, of course. Dr. Laura Briden also has a blog. And then I also really like Dr. Aviva Ram, her work. She's a midwife and a medical doctor and an herbalist. So she's like all the things. She's got that medical background, but then she's also very holistic. She has a book called Hormone Intelligence and a lot of training. So if you're curious and you want to feel better, then she's also an amazing resource for you.
Well, we got quite a few recommendations. Boom, you know your stuff. Awesome. That's incredible. I just took note of all that, so I will be sure to link that in the show notes. Now, I think so many of us have gained such an insight and educational. This has been incredible. Where can people find more of what you do and just find you?
Yeah. Okay. So it's really easy. I'm at Vanessa Oly, Oly's O-L-Y, wellness, everywhere. So VanessaOlyWellness.com, Vanessa Oly Wellness on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. Share a lot of free content on Instagram. We've got a blog going up very soon that will have a lot of articles. And then all of my services, anything that I do is going to be at VanessaOlyWellness.com. So that's where you can find me. You can come say hey. You can learn a little bit more, have some fun talking about your period. That's where we hang out.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been incredible, so informative. I think our listeners are going to gain so much value from this, and I just appreciate your time.
Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate you too.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we will chat soon and take care.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.